Have you ever stopped to think about a name for hundreds of millions of people all across Africa? That name is Bantu. But where in the world did it come from? And what are the very first written clues we have about their ancestors? Well, today, we're going on a historical detective mission. We're going to piece together a story from ancient scrolls, old sea charts, and the frankly brilliant work of linguists who cracked a fascinating linguistic code. Let's get into it.
Right, so our whole investigation really boils down to two huge questions. First, what are the oldest records, the actual physical records of Bantu peoples that have survived? And second, how did this one single name, Bantu, come to describe hundreds of different groups across this vast continent? The answers are going to take us on an incredible journey through time, all the way from ancient Egypt to the birth of modern linguistics.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the name itself, where it came from. Then we'll dig into a pretty controversial ancient theory. We'll follow the trail to the first really detailed records. We'll see a language get captured in print for the very first time. We'll meet the guy who decoded its grammatical genius. And then finally, we'll see how all these clues snap together to define the Bantu family.
Before the mid-1800s, the term Bantu, as we know it, as a scientific label, just didn't exist in writing. So who came up with it and why?
Okay, so the person who gave this language family its name was a German linguist named W.H.I. Bleek. And what's amazing is that we can pinpoint the exact moments this name entered the academic world. In 1857, he jots it down in a manuscript. Just a year later, it gets published for the first time. And then by 1869, with his huge, groundbreaking book, the term Bantu was officially on the map, cemented in the world of science.
So why that word? This, right here, is the crucial point. Bleek didn't just pull a label out of thin air. He found a pattern. He realized that the root word for people are human. Ntu, with these little prefixes like ba or aba, was like a golden thread running through hundreds of languages. So in this really profound act of recognition, he chose a name that actually came from within the languages themselves. Bantu just means the people.
All right, so for our first piece of solid, verifiable evidence, we have to leap forward to the 10th century AD, and our focus is going to shift to the bustling trade routes of the Indian Ocean, where Arab and Persian geographers and sailors were keeping amazing records of their encounters along the East African coast.
So around the year 956, this incredible Arab historian and geographer, Al-Masudi, he paints this vivid picture. He describes the land of the Zing, and this was a name for a people whose territory stretched over a massive area. I mean, from the upper Nile all the way down to modern-day Mozambique. He wasn't just describing some small, isolated group. He was describing a widespread, established civilization.
But how can we be so sure these Zing people were Bantu speakers? Well, the evidence is in the words they wrote down. Their king was called Wafalima, a plural form for ruler in Bantu languages. Decades earlier, another writer noted their word for God was Mukulugulu, which is a clear cousin to words for God in many southern Bantu languages spoken today. Add that to the fact that their territory lines up perfectly with the later Great Zimbabwe culture, and the picture gets crystal clear. The name Zing might have been an outsider's label, but the words they were speaking, undeniably Bantu.
You know what's really cool? We can actually watch this foreign name, Zang, evolve over hundreds of years. Look at this. It starts as Zangene in Roman texts. It becomes Zanjia in Arabic, which eventually turns into Zanzibar, the coast of the Zanj, which gives us the name Zanzibar. But here's the fascinating twist. Linguists now believe that even the indigenous Swahili name for the island, Unguja, is itself an adaptation of these foreign terms, just shaped over centuries by the natural sounds of a Bantu language.
Okay, so descriptions from traders are absolutely invaluable. But a truly pivotal moment in any history is when a language gets captured in a printed book for the very first time. I mean, this just marks a whole new era of documentation, of study, and preservation.
For a Bantu language, that historic year was 1624.
And this is the book, the Doutrina Christiana. It was published in Lisbon, and on the surface, it was a Christian catechism. But what made it so historic was its parallel text, a translation into the Kongo language, which was put together by Jesuit priests working hand in hand with native Kongo speakers. For the very first time, a Bantu language was systematically written down and printed.
And it didn't stop there. Just a couple of decades later, another book, Gintio de Angola, went even further. While it was documenting the Ndongo language, its authors made the first written observations about something called grammatical tone. That's the crucial feature where just changing the pitch of a syllable completely changes a word's meaning, something absolutely fundamental to so many Bantu languages.
Printing words is one thing. That's a huge step. But to understand a language's deep, underlying structure, its unique genius, that is a whole different challenge. And for that, we have to turn to the intellectual hero of our story, an Italian priest named Giacinto Brusciotto.
So in 1659, Brusciotto publishes a grammar of the Kongo language, and he's faced with a system that's completely alien to him, coming from Latin. He started noticing that nouns fell into different groups, and the group a noun belonged to, well, it controlled the form of all the other words in the sentence. He came up with a name for these groups, principitiations. This was the first ever description of the noun class and concord system, which you might call the grammatical engine of Bantu languages.
So how on earth did he figure this out? Well, first, he tried what he knew, Latin grammar, but he realized pretty quickly, nope, that's not going to work here. Then he identified his principiations, these noun classes. And here is where his absolute genius comes in. He didn't just group the nouns by their prefixes, like others might have, he grouped them based on how they forced other words in the sentence to change and agree with them. This was such a profound insight into how the language worked, which he then mapped out in the world's first ever concord tables for a Bantu language.
You can almost feel his mind being blown in his own writing. He wrote that the Kongo language is not founded upon the declension of words, like Latin is, but on their principiation. He knew. He absolutely knew he had stumbled upon a completely different and beautifully logical grammatical system.
And now, our whole investigation comes full circle. 200 years after Brusciotto's incredible analysis, we come back to our guy, W.H.I. Bleek. We're about to see how he stood on the shoulders of these pioneers to make that final, unifying connection.
Bleek wasn't starting from scratch, not at all. He had access to centuries of word lists, translations, and, crucially, that foundational grammar laid out by Brusciotto. But he brought a brand new tool to the table, the modern science of comparative philology. This let him zoom out from just describing one language to defining the shared characteristics of an entire family of hundreds of languages.
See, Bleek's entire definition rested on two incredibly powerful pillars. The first was a shared core vocabulary, and the best example of that was the root N2 for person. The second was a shared and totally unique grammatical engine, that same noun class and concord system that Brusciotto had first figured out. A shared root word and a shared grammatical DNA. These were the scientific principles that gave him the proof he needed to unite all these languages under one name, Bantu.
Wow, what a journey it's been, really. From those unproven whispers in ancient Punt all the way to the solid records of the Zing on the Swahili Coast. From the very first printed words in the Kongo language to the genius of Brusciotto decoding its grammar, and finally to Bleek, who brought it all together to name one of the world's great language families.